Welcome, everybody, to Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, the author of Writing That Gets Noticed, Find Your Voice, Become a Better Storyteller, Get Published, which was named by Poets and Writers a best book for writers. Every week, I speak with novelists, with authors, with writers of every niche to talk about their tips, their tricks, their strategies, and how the sauce is made, including creative advice. I'll talk about essays and articles and share my own experience from 3 decades of publishing. So join me every week and grow your business and build your craft with Freelance Writing Direct. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. And follow along on Substack, where I share special clips for subscribers only at estelleserasmus.substack.com. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, and I'm so excited to have Denne Michele Norris with us again, talking about electric literature. She's the editor-in-chief of Electric Literature, winner of the Whiting Literary Magazine Prize. She's the first Black, openly trans woman to helm a major literary publication. She co-hosts the critically acclaimed podcast, Food for Thought, THOT, and holds an MFA from Sarah Lawrence College. And we met at the Open Secrets Live event with the wonderful Rachel Kramer Bustle, who helms that. And it's just so great to be talking to you now about Electric Lit. Can you tell me what to you the mission is of Electric Lit?
Yes. So Electric Lit's mission is to make literature more exciting, relevant, and inclusive. And so to that end, just in case folks are unfamiliar, Electric Lit is an online digital literary publication of short work. We've been around since 2009. And we publish everything from a longer form short fiction to short stories. We publish poetry, we publish author interviews, book lists, cultural criticism essays, and personal narrative essays. All of our work is free and easy to access at our website. And so you can read that. We pay all of our contributors. And so my feeling is that when you break down that mission, Electric Lit is really about uplifting writers who are doing high quality, smart, unpretentious, but serious work, writers who want to engage with other literary work and other cultural work, because there's a lot of we don't exactly publish reviews, but like cultural criticism, as I mentioned. And we work with a lot of emerging writers. Literary magazines are often the place where writers are cutting their teeth, going through sometimes their first or very early publication experiences as they're moving towards the goal of finishing a book and publishing a book, which means that very often we or places like us are the first places where writers are sort of becoming authors, as I like to say, are being edited professionally, are going through the publication process, are looking at like contracts, all of those kinds of things, which is really important in their development once they begin to deal with like the really big stuff like books.
Yes, I'm familiar with the website, but some of the essays out telling my lost child the story of his life. That's an excerpt from the Orange Notebooks. Sleeping through it is the best part. Expensive naps I've taken, a graphic narrative. I assume that's the humor, the comedy. The Strange Lady Will Not Hand Back Her Baby, the final girl from Lake Songs. So that's like an excerpt. The Humanities Building Has Lost Its Humanity, 2 prose poems by Jake Levine. The New York Times Connections Destroyed Society, and We're Fine with It. Flash fiction. My Husband's Dream Woman Will Outlive Me, 3D Printing the World and Other Dreams, and that's another flash fiction. So it really covers the gamut. Plus you have, I think it's called The Commuter, right? So that's part of that flash fiction prose.
Yes. So the Commuter is where we publish the shortest work. So flash fiction, flash prose, poetry, and graphic narrative. Yeah. Then we have recommended. So it's really interesting. We're sort of like an umbrella as Electric Lit, but then we have 3 verticals that are underneath it. And so the Commuter is that one. Recommended reading is where we'll publish like longer short stories. So short stories that might be 5, 6, 7,000 words. And then personal narrative is where we publish literary essays and excerpts of nonfiction books that are coming out. And again, those are going to be longer form. And then outside of all of those 3 is where we've got the author interviews, the book lists, the cultural criticism essays. So it's a little bit of a complicated web in terms of how it's organized, but we do a little bit of everything, or a lot of everything, because we publish 10 to 15 pieces a week.
Wow, 10 to 15 a week. Okay. Do people retain rights?
Yes, so we do retain exclusive rights for 90 days when we
Okay.
publish something, and then after that, they revert back to the
It reverts
author.
back. That's the ideal. I think
Yeah.
that works really well. And what do you
Yeah.
pay writers approximately?
Most of the time, it's between $75 and $125. So it's not a lot, partly because we publish so much. But interviews and reading lists, we're usually paying 75 approximately. For the essays, we're usually paying 100. And for the Commuter, I think we pay 100. And then for recommended reading, where it's the longer form short fiction, we pay 300 for that.
In terms of personal essays, what will elevate a personal essay that's being submitted to EL?
I'm so happy you asked this question because we had our personal narrative editorial meeting, our weekly meeting, and it's so interesting. One of the things that I think is really happening a lot right now in sort of very literary nonfiction is that writers are often writing around what they want to say. A really common problem that we're getting, like, so we're always looking for really beautiful writing, really beautiful, exceptional writing, or very clear, sort of concise writing. But very often, what's wrapped up in that is authors that are trying to be very opaque about everything instead of saying the thing that they want to say. And very often, it's like if everything about the essay is opaque, you haven't given the reader a way to ground themselves in what you're reading. And I think that very often, in particular, nonfiction writers don't always remember that the reader is not in your brain. So things that are very clear and almost don't even need to be mentioned to you still need to be made clear on the page, because part of being an editor at a specific place is growing to understand your readers and what they expect from you and what they're used to reading. And so what I'm always looking for is work that doesn't have so many questions that the reader is going to stop because they're going to get caught up in trying to find the answers to their questions rather than moving through the narrative and trusting that the narrative will give them the answers that they need.
So, what would be an example, like if you could just even make one up, of something that would come, it would be opaque, and you're like, well, just say it. So, what would be an example of that?
So there was an essay that we recently evaluated where I was really quite disappointed that we couldn't publish it because the talent to me was so clear on the page. But it was an essay, and it was structured really interestingly, where the beginning of the essay referred to an it. So the essay begins with, it happened in New York, it happened in Los Angeles, it happened in, and there's, I don't know, 15 different sort of locations and settings where the person is saying it. And then the essay really was a collection of memories of what happened in some of these spaces. Now, the writing was specific in terms of each sort of memory, but what was opaque about it is that it was not clear by the end of the essay what the it was, because the moments were also different. And there was not a lot of decision about what to foreground in the essay and what to background. So when you finished reading it, you were like, I don't even know what the it that this is supposed to be centering is. Like, you couldn't put your finger on it. And then the other problem with it was that ideally that essay would have like looked at all of this and brought it all together, and it would have used its innovative structure to say something about what it was trying to say that probably couldn't have been said in a different, more accessible way. And it did not do that. It just sort of ended. And so I was just like, this just needs, this needs a few more drafts, it needs a few more rounds, it perhaps needs more time. Very often we're dealing with like, I think when we're looking at the nonfiction submissions, we're like, this writer needs more time to sort of think through this and to process what they're writing about and to be able to write about it with the necessary distance to give the reader what they need to appreciate what they've written. And so I think this is probably a situation of that. But like all of these things about it were so opaque that you couldn't come away with it with a greater sense of anything, really.
It needed like a theme, a thread, something that could then just pull together why it matters to write about
Yes.
it. Let's say somebody has a story. I mean, an editor once told me everyone, has a story about grief, about loss, about marriage, about children. It's not just this sad thing happened to me or this happy thing happened to me. What makes it an electric lit story? Do you have to reference literary terms? Do you have to reference literary works? Do you have to bring a cultural critique element in? Like, what is it that brings it out?
It really depends on the part of electric lit that someone's trying to submit to. So I can't necessarily speak to the commuter or recommended reading as much because I'm over everything else and I have nothing to do with those sections. But for the main site and for personal narrative, I mean, the first thing that we're looking for is just beautiful, clear writing. And then we're always looking for someone who's saying something either new that we sort of haven't seen before or haven't heard before, or we're looking for a piece of writing that is saying something that perhaps is familiar, but they're saying it in a different way, or they're adding on to it, or they're looking at it from a slightly different angle. For the parts of the site that are less narrative focused, like cultural criticism, it's really interesting because we try to not publish too many things about one sort of topic or one item. But I remember that back in, I think it was 2021, Sally Rooney published the novel Beautiful World, Where Are You? And I actually did end up accepting and publishing 4 essays about that book. They were all very different, had very different points of view. They weren't even talking about the same things. And we knew that our readers would love it, and they did. And so that sort of thing can happen. It's very rare, but it can happen. But yeah, it's really about writing. I will say I feel that we want everything to be very accessible. One common thing that happens is we get a lot of people who are academics who want to write sort of more cultural work, and very often they take a very academic approach to the way that they write, both in terms of the sentence level writing and the craft, and also in terms of what they want to say and how they want to say it. And so that's a sort of frequent thing that we have to sort of move writers away from if they're going to publish for us. We're not an academic journal, we're a creative writing journal, and we want to publish smart work, but we want it to be accessible for everyone, and we want it to be sort of unpretentious, is a word that I think we do use somewhere in the masthead.
So can people do references, the literary references throughout if it blends
Oh,
in? Is
yes.
you like that?
Yes.
Okay.
And very often we're looking for, in terms of the cultural criticism, we're looking for folks to write sort of critique that's sort of blended maybe with some personal narrative, sometimes of TV shows, of books, of movies, of music. We publish quite a bit of that.
Who are your readers?
Our readership, luckily, is, especially for a literary journal, is really vast. We average over 3 million readers a year, sort of globally, definitely sort of centered in the United States, but we absolutely have readers in other parts of the world, and a good amount of them, which is really nice. And so we're actually also trying to bring in more translation, which is really exciting. So just making a note of that. But I would say that our readers are largely speaking in the millennial age bracket, but we do have lots of readers who are older than that, and we certainly have lots of readers that are younger than that. But we were sort of started by millennials, and we sort of were launched in sort of peak millennials being in sort of mid-20s. And so a lot of our readers have been with us for many, many, many years and have grown up with us. And so it's been interesting because we've had to have conversations and have had to think about different ways of doing certain things because our largest demographic is sort of aging out of certain activities and aging into other activities, which has been really interesting to think about. But yeah, I would say they're sort of our prime audience age-wise.
And what's the word count? I know you said short for most of the essays. Is that like 900, 1,000 words, or is short like
Yes.
more than that?
No, so short's more than that. I mostly say that so people don't think that we publish books, because there are people who are like, oh, you publish books. No, we don't publish books.
Yeah.
So when I say short, the word count is usually, I think, 1,200 for the Commuter, but for everything else, we're in the thousands. So I think for recommended reading, I think it might even be up to 10,000. And for personal narrative, it's up to 6,000 or so. And then interviews, book lists, criticism, essays, they don't have a strict minimum or maximum, but they usually hover between sort of 1,700 and maybe 3,200.
And what are some of your most popular pieces that have done really well, maybe even surprised you that they did so well?
It's so interesting. So just recently, we had two author interviews that did really, really well. We tried sort of a new interview format with Peter Orner, who published a story with us many, many years ago. And that piece has like really taken off, that interview. It just went up. And so that's one. We had a piece by a writer. This one is from like many years ago, like maybe 8 or 9 years ago, but we had a sort of iconic piece by Carmen Maria Machado. I'm blanking on the name of it right now, but I think I can find it for you later, that went viral, that did really well. We have one essay from last year that has continued to do well, and that was actually, the title is something about I'm my mother's daughter, but it's about the TV show Shrinking. It's sort of a blend between cultural criticism and personal narrative, and it's about the TV show Shrinking. And that one continues to do really well. And so you sort of never know. Sometimes we'll predict that certain things will do really well and will be correct, and sometimes we are totally wrong, and you just never know. But one of the really fun things about being an online magazine, an online journal, is that, if a piece is sort of maybe not taking off quite the way we thought it might, we can always re-examine how we've headlined it and how we've given it a subheading. And sometimes we can change those things, and that will boost an essay or an interview or whatever. In general, our most sort of popular pieces we'll do these like big book lists at the beginning of the year usually. And so we'll do like Reese Kwan, R.O. Kwan, the author, always does a book list about forthcoming books for the year that are women of color. And that list always does very, very well. We have been publishing sort of forthcoming or most anticipated LGBTQ lists. That's always really popular. We do a list that is sort of indie, like books being published by great small presses, and that one does really well because we do a lot of work supporting small presses and their authors and publishing their work. And so it really just depends. But in general, our reading lists usually get the most traffic. It seems like everyone's always looking for lists about books to read. And we try to do timely lists sometimes as well. So lists that might have to do with some political thing or pop cultural phenomenon that's happening. And those always do well.
Is there any topic you won't cover?
I can't think of anything.
And is there anything you're craving? Like, send me a story if you're this.
I'm just craving more really strong sort of cultural criticism. I think we've got a lot of great TV that's happening right now, a lot of great films. And I want to see, I never got a pitch on the film Sinners that came out earlier this year. I would have loved to have seen that. I would love to get a pitch about The Morning Show on Apple. There's a show that's coming out in November called All's Fair, and it's a Ryan Murphy show, and it's got Kim Kardashian in it, which I think is very interesting. But it's got a cast of women that I love, and divorce narratives by women have been really big the last few years, and so I think that could be an interesting piece to sort of talk about that show in light of the last few years of some of the most popular divorce memoirs that have happened. Like that's just off the top of my head, but that would be interesting and would probably play well with our readers. So I'm always thinking about things. Anything that's connected to a pop culture moment, I'm always interested of. One thing I will tell you that I have a complicated relationship with is, the last time Taylor Swift put out an album, we were getting tons and tons and tons of pitches about Taylor Swift. And every time we publish content about Taylor Swift, it always does well. We're a little bit over it, but it's interesting. We've only gotten a couple pitches about this last album. And so I'm always interested in strong content about Taylor Swift. We haven't gotten it yet this season, but we'll probably get some. But if anyone wants to write about this album, I'd be curious to see it.
Is there anything that I didn't ask you about Electric Lit that you want to share?
One thing that I didn't say earlier that I like to say in the pitch that I forgot is that we are a nonprofit organization. So we are always having to fundraise. And so, if you want to support us, like there's lots of ways to do that. We do offer consultations on manuscripts, mostly on shorter work, but we have recently started doing book length consultations as well. So be on the lookout for when we release those. We often have a fundraiser going on. So soon we'll start our sort of end of year fundraising campaign. We have done events in the past that are fundraisers, which are a lot of fun. So just paying attention to that. But we are a nonprofit. We're dealing with everything that a lot of other nonprofits in the Trump administration are dealing with. We got our NEA funding for this year because we happened to put in for it very early, but we're not even applying for it in the future for now because we're not going to do that as long as he's in charge. So we're having to make up all that. And so it's just something to think about if people want to support a literary nonprofit.
Yeah. So, Dan, you have a lot to juggle. I mean, you finished your book. I'm assuming you're thinking of a new project. I don't know if it's too early to talk about that, but you were also recently in an anthology, both and. Can you talk a little bit about that? And also if there is something on the horizon?
Yes. So thank you so much for mentioning Both And. So Both And is the anthology that I edited in partnership with Electric Lit. It is an anthology of essays by trans and gender nonconforming writers of color. It arose from an online essay series that we fundraised for and published a few years ago. And then I went and wrote a book proposal and we were able to sell it and it came out this year. So I've published 2 books this year, which has been really a busy and intense season, but it has been great. So Both And is out now. People can go buy it in any bookstore. It was published by Harper One, which is an imprint of HarperCollins. And in terms of my own fiction, there is a new novel that I'm working on slowly. I don't want to say too much, but the 2 things that I have already said that I'm happy to say is that one, it's a figure skating novel. I grew up also as a competitive figure skater. So it's a figure skating novel. And it's also set squarely in Ohio. So whereas Harvest took place in multiple locations, and partly in Montauk, partly in New York City, partly in Ohio, this next novel is set in Ohio.
That's so exciting. You don't think it'll take 14 years though this time, right? You get
God, I hope not. I hope not. I think it's a little more ambitious in size and scope, but I also feel a lot more confident in knowing how to write a novel now. Like I don't have to feel my way through it in the same way. And also, unlike Harvest, this one has been sort of like I haven't had much time to write much of it, but like this year, it's just been like pouring into me. And so I know it so much better than I knew Harvest when I was at this stage. And so I'm hoping that I can move much more quickly on it.
Wow. What would your dad say about your book if he was to see it?
I think he would be very proud. He did pass away at the beginning of my MFA experience, so he knew that I was trying to be a writer. But my family loves reading, and my parents loved reading, and they really imbued a love of storytelling and reading into me and into all of their kids. And so I think he would be really, really proud of that and of having a child who published a novel, because I don't think it's something that he, for most of his life, saw coming.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for sharing so much about Electric Lit, what you're looking for, both and your upcoming work.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a joy.
Follow me at estelleserasmus.com on my website and on social media, which is Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Estelle S. Erasmus. And we're now on YouTube for Freelance Writing Direct. Follow along, and soon everyone will be reading what you're writing.